As I mentioned earlier, Ramadan has begun, and that was always said to be the deadline for a ceasefire in Gaza, where 1 million people are still holed up in Rafah, fearfully awaiting an Israeli assault, where hunger is widespread and where promised US aid by sea is still to arrive. There is no sign of that ceasefire, nor any that the Israelis will refrain from a full-on assault against the last Hamas stronghold. Can there be any kind of peace deal while Benjamin Netanyahu remains Israeli Prime Minister? In a very rare television interview at the weekend, the US President, Joe Biden, made clear his frustration with the Israeli leader.
What's happening is he has a right to defend Israel, a right to continue to pursue Hamas, but he must pay more attention to the innocent lives being lost as a consequence of the actions taken. He's hurting, in my view, he's hurting Israel more than helping Israel by making the rest of the world, it's contrary to what Israel stands for. And I think it's a big mistake. So I want to see a ceasefire.
Biden also said that any Rafah operation was a red line for the US administration. But last night, in a show of brazen defiance, Benjamin Netanyahu made it clear he's unwilling to take any account of that. And here is what he said in an interview with Fox News earlier today.
He said that he agrees that we have to destroy Hamas as a fighting organization. That's what we intend to do. Look, it's either Israel or Hamas. There's no middle way. I mean, we have to have that victory. We can't have 3/4 of a victory. We can't have 2/3 of a victory, because Hamas will reconstitute itself with these 4 battalions in Rafah, reconquer the Gaza Strip, and do the October 7th massacre over and over and over again. And for us in Israel, not merely for me,
Mr. Prime
but
Minister,
for the people of Israel, that's a red line. We can't let Hamas survive.
I'm joined now by Daniel Levy, president of the US Middle East Project and former peace negotiator and advisor to several Israeli prime ministers. Very good to see you there, Daniel. Can I ask you, is this a really critical moment in relations between Washington and Tel Aviv, or is it just more of the sort of same word games?
I'm not at all convinced, Andrew, that we're at that critical moment, because I think Prime Minister Netanyahu, for now at least, correctly assesses that President Biden is not willing to do the things that may lead to an Israeli recalculation, that may upset Netanyahu's internal politics, and that may actually make it difficult for him to continue to pursue not a war against Hamas, but the devastation of civilian life of Palestinians in Gaza, which is actually what's been happening for the last more than 5 months now.
I mean, Biden made it very clear how irritated he is. What would he actually have to do to get Netanyahu's proper attention?
Well, Andrew, irritation, frustration, name-calling, these are not policies. These are demonstrations of weakness. Because what President Biden has done is he has continued to transfer the weapons, the ordnance, the arms, without which Israel could not continue this. He knows that. The Israelis know that. So when he, for instance, says we're going to open a seaport facility, this is a demonstration of weakness, because it shows he hasn't gotten the Israelis to open the land route, which is where you can really get the humanitarian assistance that's needed, given the devastation that has been wrought. So unless and until Prime Minister Netanyahu thinks there is a credible American position that those weapons will not continue to flow, I think he has President Biden pretty much exactly where he wants him. And here's the crucial thing. The fault
That's very interesting.
In Israel.
Yeah.
Can I just the fault line in Israel, which could actually develop some real fractions there, some real complications for Netanyahu, is the release of the hostages. And the Americans do not seem to be willing to say, and this is the case, having spoken to the mediators, that the problem is not so much with Hamas. It's hard to say this, but not so much with Hamas as it is with the Israeli negotiating position. That's where Bibi is weak. If you combine those two things, say we've got to get the hostages out, that requires ABC that you're not willing to do, and we're not going to provide the weapons if you don't do that, then Netanyahu begins to get wobbly.
But they're not there yet. And the other interesting sort of rumour around is that there are serious fissures inside the governing coalition. And I know he's not exactly a moderate, but Benny Gans has been off to Washington, or is going to Washington, and there are beginning to be sort of signs that there could be some move against Netanyahu from inside his government. How do you read that?
So Gans was in Washington. He was here in London. As you say, Gans has not come out against the conduct of this war, but Gans would possibly prioritise the hostage issue. That is where there has been some cleavage between him and Netanyahu. Gans has not been someone who's pursued peace, that's clear. But right now, if we want to get an end to this, those American steps, not meeting with Gans, that doesn't impress anyone, but the steps that I spoke of, the weapons, stop vetoing things at the UN Security Council, that is what could open up those fissures. Right now, Gans is look, he's not a profile in political courage. He's not a profile in political sophistication either. He's been a failed candidate. But on this front, there could be an opening, not if the US and others, and Britain still hasn't made a determination on whether it will continue to sell weapons to Israel, by the way, not while that is still going on.
Finally, things are grim enough without me making them sound grimmer, but 1 million people still penned up against the border in Rafah, and I'm told that the Israeli government is still absolutely determined that there will be a full-scale assault there in due course to destroy Hamas, and that was more or less what Netanyahu was saying openly to Fox News earlier today. What are the consequences in human terms of that kind of full-scale assault on what has become both the centre for Hamas, that is also true, but also an enormous refugee camp?
Well, it has, because Israel has continued to tell the Palestinian civilian population, move to this is a safe zone. Everywhere gets bombed. There are no safe zones. Rafah is the last thing pinned up against the Egyptian border. Israel has made clear that it would like to push the Palestinians out of Gaza. It hasn't had the opportunity to do that. I think this could have broader regional implications. We're bombing the Houthis in Yemen. If you want to see an end to what's going on in the Red Sea, you end what's going on in Gaza. It seems patently obvious. So the human consequences of this, where you have now the majority of the Gaza civilian population, are even worse than what we have seen. And what we have seen is that the most rapid rate of death, the greatest threat of starvation, the most intense bombing per capita in terms of a squeezed civilian population. And if Rafah happens, that will get even worse. It can. The Israelis aren't ready yet militarily. They don't have the troop deployments ready to do it. But if the Israelis say, we're going to do Rafah, and Biden says don't, and Bibi says, are you still going to send weapons if I do it? And the Americans are stum, they keep mum, they don't cut off that weapon supply, do not turn around and cry crocodile tears for the population in Rafah.
And that would be an utter catastrophe. Final question, because it's very, very relevant to all of this. The Israelis still think that they have the effective support underneath the surface, certainly, of Saudi Arabia and some other Arab states. Are they about to lose that, do you think?
Well, let's be clear. What's going on in the public, and it's not just in the Arab or Muslim public, we see it on the streets of London, where I feel very safe as a Jew, by the way, week in, week out, weekend in, weekend out. Israel has lost credibility, lost support. It's not doing well in the war, but it's also committing plausibly a genocide, according to the International Court of Justice. The Arab states, the Arab governments have not yet stepped in and used leverage. That's part of how they position themselves, their relations with the West. But I think they're out of sync with their publics, and it's going to be, in this month of Ramadan, it's going to be a more tense time. So let's see where that leads.
All right. Daniel Levy, on the most important story in the world today, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC.